Picture this. You're seated at an opulent dinner, crystal chandeliers casting shadows over plates worth more than most people's rent. One careless remark, or perhaps not so careless from the CEO's wife, ignites a spark. That spark, through the hands of an underestimated woman, would explode into an inferno that torched $39 million from the company's coffers in mere days. You won't believe how perfectly orchestrated it all was. Before dessert even arrived. My name is Victoria Sterling, and I've spent 12 years climbing the ruthless ladder of strategic consulting. At 38, I'd orchestrated mergers worth billions, salvaged companies from the brink of collapse, and earned my seat at tables where decisions moved markets. That night at Le Bernardin, I thought I was attending another routine client dinner. I was wrong. The private dining room gleamed with understated elegance, white tablecloths crisp as new money, stemware that sang when fingernails tapped against crystal. Our firm had reserved it for global tech industries. Our newest whale of a client with a contract worth $39 million over 3 years. I'd spent 4 months crafting the strategy that landed them. Victoria, you're next to Mrs. Hartwell, my managing partner David murmured, guiding me to my seat. Patricia Hartwell, the CEO's wife, looked like she'd been poured into her black Valentino dress, diamonds catching light at her throat. She barely acknowledged me, her attention fixed on her phone's glow. "It must be nice," she said, swirling her chablis. "Having such a talent for making PowerPoints pretty. Richard always says the real strategic work happens at the C-suite level, but someone has to color inside the lines, I suppose." The table went quiet, not the comfortable quiet of people enjoying their seared scallops, but the awkward silence of witnesses to a social execution. Richard Hartwell, the CEO, chuckled, and added, "Patricia has a point. The presentation layer is important for optics." Presentation layer? Optics? As if I hadn't spent 70-hour weeks analyzing their supply chain weaknesses, identifying redundancies that were hemorrhaging cash, building predictive models that would save them millions. "How fascinating," I replied, my smile practiced from years of swallowing institutional sexism with my morning coffee. "I'd love to hear more about your perspective on strategic implementation. Mrs. Hartwell, what's your background in?" "Oh, I don't bore myself with all that," she laughed, a tinkling sound like breaking glass. "I leave the spreadsheets to people like you. Richard handles the vision. You girls handle the details." "You girls," the words hung in the air like a challenge. Around the table, several of my male colleagues shifted uncomfortably. Tom from our tech division coughed into his napkin, but James Mitchell, Global Tech's newly appointed Director of Strategic Initiatives, a man who'd joined them just 2 weeks prior, he smiled like he'd just been handed a gift. "The devil's in the details, they say," James offered, raising his glass toward Patricia, "though I'm sure we can streamline some of those elaborate frameworks going forward. Sometimes consultants can overcomplicate things." I catalogued every word, every glance, every nervous laugh from the supposed allies at my own firm's side of the table. David said nothing. Sarah, my junior analyst, looked like she wanted to disappear into her duck confit. The rest continued eating, pretending the assassination attempt hadn't just occurred between the second and third courses. "You're absolutely right, James," I said, my voice steady as my pulse raced. "Complexity without purpose is just theater, but then again, some people can't tell the difference between strategy and performance. It takes a certain depth of understanding." Patricia's eyes narrowed slightly. She understood the insult, even if her husband was too busy checking his phone to notice. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of empty conversation. I memorized every slight, every dismissive gesture, every moment Patricia Hartwell touched James Mitchell's arm when she laughed at his vapid jokes about consultant speak. They thought they were watching me shrink. They had no idea they were watching me plan. As dessert menus arrived, Le Bernardin's famous soufflé tempting, from the leather-bound pages, I excused myself to the restroom. In the mirror, I saw what they saw: a woman in a perfectly tailored theory suit, understated makeup, Competent and forgettable, the help, the girl who colors inside the lines. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found her name, Margaret Chen, Senior EVP at Global Tech, the woman who'd recruited me to this firm a decade ago when I was just another Harvard MBA with something to prove. We hadn't spoken in months, but certain relationships transcend time. I typed carefully, having dinner with your CEO and his wife, interesting perspectives on strategic value. Coffee Tuesday. Her response came before I'd even refreshed my lipstick. My office, 7 a.m. Come hungry. I returned to the table as the soufflé arrived, golden and perfect, collapsing the moment the spoon broke its surface. Patricia was regaling the table with a story about their renovation of their Hamptons house, the cost of Italian marble, the difficulty of finding good help. Leaving so soon, she asked, as I gathered my coat, the dessert untouched at my place setting. Early morning, I replied. Presentations to Prettify. She laughed again, that same brittle sound. Richard didn't look up from his phone. James Mitchell was already eyeing my empty chair like territory to be claimed. They had no idea what they'd just set in motion, but they would. Oh, they would. The morning after the dinner, I arrived at our offices at 6:30 a.m., my usual time. The 42nd floor was empty except for security and the overnight cleaning crew. I liked these quiet hours, when I could think without the performative buzz of corporate activity. By 9 a.m., the conference room was full. David had called an alignment meeting for the Global Tech account. I knew what was coming before James Mitchell walked through the door. Guest badge clipped to his Tom Ford suit. Team, good news, David announced, his voice carrying that false enthusiasm executives use when they're about to screw someone over. Global Tech has asked James to take a more integrated role in our engagement. He'll be working closely with us to ensure we're meeting their evolving needs. Evolving needs. Corporate speak for, we're about to gut everything you built. James stood, buttoning his jacket with practiced ease. I've reviewed the current framework, he began, pulling up my slides, my analysis, my models, my 70-hour weeks on the screen. While comprehensive, I think we can achieve the same outcomes with a more streamlined approach. He clicked to the next slide. My detailed supply chain analysis had been replaced with a single pie chart. My predictive models, which had taken 3 weeks to build and validate, were now bullet points. Buzzwords like synergy and optimization peppered the deck like seasoning on flavorless food. This is certainly more digestible, David nodded. Victoria, you'll support James in implementing these adjustments. Support, not lead, support. I have concerns about the risk assessment methodology, I said, keeping my voice level. The simplified version doesn't account for the variables we identified in the Southeast Asian markets, the currency fluctuations alone. That's exactly the kind of overcomplexity we need to avoid, James interrupted. The C-suite doesn't need a dissertation. They need clarity. Clarity without accuracy is just fiction, I responded. The room went silent. Sarah, my analyst, was frantically taking notes. Tom from Tech was studying his coffee cup like it contained the secrets of the universe. James smiled. That particular smile men wear when they think they've already won. I understand this might be difficult, Victoria. You've put a lot of work into this, but sometimes we need to let go of our personal attachments to see the bigger picture. Personal attachments, as if my insistence on data integrity was some emotional weakness. Of course, I said, returning his smile with one of my own. I'm always happy to see the bigger picture. Perhaps you could walk me through how your simplified model accounts for the 23% variance in Q3 projections. I'm sure the board will ask about that during the quarterly review. His smile flickered. We'll address that in subsequent iterations. Subsequent iterations don't help if the initial implementation fails, I pressed. Global Tech is hemorrhaging $2.3 million monthly in their Singapore operations alone. Your pie chart doesn't even mention Singapore. We'll take this offline, David interjected, the warning clear in his tone. James, why don't you continue with the presentation? For the next 40 minutes, I watched James Mitchell systematically dismantle 4 months of strategic planning, replacing substance with style, analysis with assumptions. The other consultants nodded along, some genuinely convinced, others just smart enough to read the room's new power dynamics. "I'll need all the raw data files transferred to my drive by end of day," James announced as the meeting concluded. "And Victoria, I'll want you to focus on the deck formatting going forward. You have an eye for that sort of thing." That sort of thing. The exact echo of Patricia Hartwell's words from the night before. "Absolutely," I replied. "I'll make sure everything is properly colored inside the lines." A few people winced at the callback. James either didn't catch it or didn't care. Back at my desk, I pulled up the global tech files. 4 months of work about to be reduced to window dressing. I opened a new browser window and logged into LinkedIn. James Mitchell's profile was impressively sparse for someone in such a senior role. Wharton MBA. Yes, but the graduation year kept changing in different bios. His previous company, a boutique firm in Chicago, had folded 8 months ago amid rumors of client disputes. Interesting. I started a new folder on my personal drive, Risk Management. Into it went every original analysis, every data point James was discarding, every projection he was oversimplifying. I included timestamps, email trails, meeting notes, all the breadcrumbs that would matter when his house of cards inevitably collapsed. Sarah knocked on my door. "Victoria, I'm sorry about the meeting. It's not right what they're doing." "It's business," I replied, not looking up from my screen. "But Sarah, keep copies of everything, the original models, the data sources, all of it." She nodded, understanding more than I was saying. "Already done." "Good. And Sarah, start brushing up your resume. This ship is about to change course, and not everyone will survive the journey." As she left, I composed another email to Margaret at Global Tech. Just a small attachment, a side-by-side comparison of my original supply chain analysis and James's streamlined version. No commentary needed. The numbers would speak for themselves. The massacre had begun. James Mitchell just didn't know he was already bleeding. Tuesday morning, 7 a.m. sharp. Margaret Thompson's corner office occupied the 53rd floor of Global Tech's headquarters, a glass fortress overlooking Manhattan's financial district. She hadn't changed much in the decade since she'd recruited me, silver hair now instead of dark brown. A few more lines around her eyes, but the same surgical precision in her gaze that could dissect a balance sheet or a human soul with equal efficiency. "Victoria," she said, gesturing to the breakfast spread on her conference table. "Still take your coffee black with judgment on the side." "Only when it's deserved," I replied, settling into the leather chair across from her. Margaret poured herself tea, a delicate china pattern that contrasted sharply with her reputation as Global Tech's most ruthless executive. "I received your comparison chart. Interesting reading. James Mitchell's projections would have us believing we can cut operational costs by 40% without any structural changes." "Magic," I said. "Or fiction. The terms are interchangeable in his methodology." "Tell me about the dinner." I gave her the highlights: Patricia's commentary, Richard's dismissiveness, James's opportunistic maneuvering. Margaret listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes in her leather-bound planner. "Patricia Hartwell," she finally said, "thinks she's Jacqueline Kennedy because she married money. She was a mid-tier real estate agent in Connecticut before Richard put a ring on it. Now she plays queen at charity galas and thinks proximity to power equals understanding it." She seemed quite confident in her assessment of my work. Margaret's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Patricia wouldn't know strategic implementation if it was served to her on Hermes china. But James Mitchell, he's more dangerous. Desperate men always are. Desperate. His Chicago firm didn't just fold, Victoria. He drove it into the ground with exactly this kind of surface-level nonsense. 3 major clients sued for breach of contract. Richard hired him as a favor to someone, but James knows he's on borrowed time. He needs a win, and he's decided you're the sacrifice. I set down my coffee cup carefully. "And what does Global Tech's senior EVP think about that?" Margaret stood and walked to her window. Manhattan sprawling below us like a circuit board. "I think," she said slowly, "that Richard Hartwell has been CEO for too long. The board's been patient. But patience has limits, especially when someone loses them $39 million. That's quite a specific number. Your original analysis, the real one, not Mitchell's cartoon version, identified $39 million in recoverable losses over the next 18 months. The board has that analysis. They also have James's revision. When the quarterly review comes, and we're still bleeding money because his streamlined approach missed critical vulnerabilities, well," she turned back to me, "the board will want answers. And heads will roll. Like bowling balls," Margaret confirmed. "The question is whose." I understood the game now. Margaret wasn't just offering sympathy. She was orchestrating a coup, and she was inviting me to be her battlefield general. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Keep giving James leeway. Let his own incompetence take him down. Record everything, every adjustment he makes, every piece of data he overlooks, every warning you raise that he brushes aside. Build a paper trail so clear that even Richard won't be able to defend him." And then, Margaret returned to her seat, her movements deliberate. "Then, when the Singapore operation finally collapses, which it will, within 6 weeks by your own projections, I'll need someone to step in immediately with a recovery plan, someone who understands the real numbers, who has the trust of the team, who can implement solutions without the learning curve." That sounds like a job description. Senior Vice President of Strategic Operations, reporting directly to me, triple your current salary, full team authority, and an equity package that would make your Harvard classmates weep with envy. The offer hung between us like a signed contract waiting for blood instead of ink. And David, my current firm, will lose the global tech account the moment James's strategy fails. $39 million worth of business, gone overnight. They backed the wrong horse. Victoria, don't let misplaced loyalty drag you down with them. I thought about David's silence during that dinner. His quick capitulation to James's demands, the way he'd relegated me to support without a moment's hesitation. "I'll need to bring my team," I said. "Sarah, Tom, a few others, the ones who actually understand the work. Done? I'll even throw in signing bonuses to ease their transition. And James Mitchell." Margaret's expression darkened. "We'll never work in this industry again. I'll personally ensure every firm from here to Silicon Valley knows exactly what kind of strategic value he brings." I extended my hand. "Then we have an understanding." Her handshake was firm, sealed with the kind of authority that reshapes organizations. "Keep your head down for now. Play the good soldier. Let James think he's won. But Victoria," she leaned forward, "when this is over, I want Global Tech to see exactly who was prettifying the PowerPoints and who was actually saving their company." As I left her office, I sent a single text to Sarah. "Weather forecast storm coming in 6 weeks. Prepare accordingly." Her response was immediate. "Already packing umbrellas." The chess pieces were in position. Now came the delicate art of letting my opponents think they were winning, right up until the moment they realized they'd already lost. The quarterly review presentation was scheduled for Thursday, 2 p.m., in Global Tech's main boardroom. James Mitchell had spent 3 weeks preparing what he called a paradigm shift in strategic communication. I'd spent those same weeks documenting every disaster he was about to unleash. "Victoria, I need you to run the slides," James announced that morning, not asking, just assuming. "I'll be focusing on the narrative." The narrative? As if business strategy was a bedtime story. The boardroom filled with Global Tech's senior leadership. Richard Hartwell sat at the head of the table. Patricia beside him, she had no official role but enjoyed pretending she did. Margaret Thompson sat directly across from me, her expression neutral as Swiss territory. The other board members, Stevens, Yamamoto, and Fitzgerald, looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Ladies and gentlemen," James began, clicking to his opening slide a word cloud, where synergy dominated in 72-point font. "Today, we're not just presenting numbers, we're painting a vision. I kept my face expressionless as he launched into his performance. Buzzwords flowed like champagne at a corporate celebration disruption. Optimization, paradigm shifts, revolutionary frameworks. Not once did he mention the actual numbers behind our recommendations. Now, regarding our Southeast Asian operations, James continued, clicking to his infamous pie chart, we've identified opportunities for dramatic cost reduction through strategic realignment. What specific costs? Margaret asked, her tone innocent as a loaded gun. Operational redundancies, James replied smoothly. Inefficiencies in the supply chain that our streamlined approach will eliminate. Could you elaborate on these redundancies? Mr. Yamamoto leaned forward. Singapore alone represents 18% of our Pacific revenue. James's smile tightened. The details are in the appendix, but essentially, we're looking at workforce optimization and vendor consolidation. Workforce optimization, he meant layoffs. Vendor consolidation, he meant breaking contracts with suppliers we'd spent years cultivating. I notice you've removed the currency hedging strategies from the original proposal, Margaret observed, flipping through her copy. Given the volatility in the region, that seems optimistic. We felt it was unnecessarily complex, James said. The market will stabilize. Based on what data? Stevens asked. Market trends, historical patterns. Which specific patterns? Margaret pressed. James clicked to another slide, a single ascending arrow over a stock photo of Singapore's skyline. Growth is inevitable in emerging markets. The room fell silent. Even Richard looked uncomfortable. Mr. Mitchell? Fitzgerald spoke for the first time. This is a $39 million strategic initiative. We need more than arrows and assumptions. The assumptions are based on solid fundamentals. What fundamentals? Margaret interrupted. Your slide doesn't show any actual data, no market analysis, no risk assessments, no contingency planning. You're asking us to bet $39 million on what exactly? James's composure cracked slightly. The framework is designed for executive-level comprehension. We didn't want to overwhelm with unnecessary details. Unnecessary. Yamamoto's voice carried decades of boardroom authority. Are you suggesting financial data is unnecessary for a financial decision? Of course not. I simply meant... Victoria, Margaret turned to me. You worked on the original analysis. Do you have the actual numbers? This was it. The moment I'd been waiting for. I do, I said, pulling out my laptop. Would you like me to share them? James's face went pale. That's not the approved deck. The board asked for numbers, Richard said quietly, the first crack in his support. Show them. I connected my laptop to the screen. This is the original risk assessment for Singapore operations. The slide showed detailed analysis currency fluctuation models, supplier dependency charts, workforce productivity metrics. As you can see, without proper hedging, we're exposed to a potential 23% loss if the Singapore dollar shifts, which 3 indicators suggest will happen within the next quarter. Why wasn't this in the presentation? Stevens demanded, looking at James. We streamlined. You gambled, Margaret corrected. With our money, Victoria. What else did Mr. Mitchell's streamlining remove? I clicked through slide after slide. The vendor relationships that took years to build, the cultural considerations for Asian markets, the regulatory requirements James had dismissed as red tape. Each revelation landed like a blow. This is an ambush, James protested. Victoria's trying to undermine. Ms. Sterling is showing us data, Yamamoto cut him off. Data you apparently decided we didn't need to see. Patricia Hartwell shifted in her seat, her diamonds catching the light as she leaned toward her husband. Richard, surely this is just a difference in presentation styles. Presentation styles. Margaret's voice could have frozen helium. Mrs. Hartwell, your expertise in real estate is noted, but perhaps strategic analysis should be left to those who understand the difference between PowerPoint and actual power. Patricia's face flushed crimson. Richard didn't defend her. Ms. Sterling, Fitzgerald addressed me directly. If we implemented Mr. Mitchell's recommendations as presented, what would be the likely outcome? I met his gaze steadily. Based on his removal of risk mitigation strategies and the oversimplification of market dynamics, conservative estimate $12 million loss in the first quarter. Worst case scenario, complete collapse of our Singapore operations within 6 months, potentially triggering a cascade failure across Southeast Asia. Total exposure, $39 million. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. James, Richard's voice was dangerously quiet. You assured me this approach was bulletproof. It is. She's just trying to complicate. Mr. Mitchell, Margaret stood, her authority filling the room. You're dismissed from this meeting. We'll discuss your future involvement with Global Tech separately. James looked around the table for support. Finding none, he gathered his materials with shaking hands. As he passed my chair, he hissed, "This isn't over." I kept my eyes on my screen. No, it's just beginning. The door closed behind him with a definitive click. Ms. Sterling. Margaret addressed the room but looked at me. Please continue with the real presentation. My phone buzzed while I was still in the Global Tech lobby, waiting for the elevator. A text from Margaret. Contract termination drafted. Lunch tomorrow. 12 words that meant everything was falling into place. The second message came from David, my managing partner. My office, now. I took my time getting back to our building, let him sweat. When I finally walked into his corner office 40 minutes later, James Mitchell was already there, pacing like a caged predator. You sabotaged me, James snarled before David could speak. I presented data, I replied, taking a seat without being asked. If facts constitute sabotage, perhaps you're in the wrong business. You went behind my back. Actually, the board asked me a direct question. Would you have preferred I lie? David raised his hand for silence. Victoria, you blindsided a client in a board meeting. That's unacceptable. What's unacceptable? I countered. Is sending a client into a $39 million catastrophe because someone wanted to play executive without doing the work. This isn't about the work. James slammed his hand on David's desk. This is about respecting hierarchy, following protocol. My phone buzzed again. This time, an email notification from Margaret, CCing David and Richard Hartwell. I opened it and read aloud. Effective immediately. Global Tech is reassessing our strategic consulting needs. We require partners who prioritize data integrity over organizational politics. A formal review of our contract will commence Monday. David's face went ashen. They can't. We have a 3-year agreement. With a performance clause, I reminded him, which specifically mentions failure to provide accurate strategic guidance. James's presentation today certainly qualifies. You did this, James pointed at me. You poisoned them against us. No. I stood, smoothing my skirt. You did this when you thought a pie chart could replace actual analysis. You did this when you assumed I'd quietly accept being sidelined. You did this when you confused Patricia Hartwell's dinner party observations with actual business acumen. Get out, David said quietly. Are you firing me? I asked, almost hoping he would. It would make my exit cleaner. Just go. We'll discuss this Monday. I gathered my things slowly, deliberately. At the door, I turned back. David, you might want to check the shared drive. I've uploaded all the original analyses, the email chains where James dismissed my concerns, and the documentation of every warning I raised. You know, for the lawsuit that's coming. What lawsuit? David stood, alarmed. The one Global Tech will file when they realize you let an unqualified opportunist gamble with $39 million of their money. The one our firm's partners will file when they realize you've lost our biggest client. Take your pick. I left them in silence. Back at my desk, Sarah was waiting with a banker's box. I figured you'd need this. You're psychic now. No, just realistic. Margaret Thompson's assistant called, asked for your availability next week for transition planning. I smiled. And I told her you'd be free, completely free. Tom appeared from around the corner. So, we're doing this. Doing what? I asked innocently. Don't play. Half the office saw Mitchell storm out. The other half heard David yelling, and everyone knows Global Tech's about to jump ship. I looked at my two most trusted colleagues. Hypothetically, if someone were to offer you positions with better pay, actual respect, and the chance to work with real data instead of Mitchell's finger paintings. Yes, they said in unison. I haven't even made an offer. You don't need to, Sarah said. We've been ready to leave since that dinner. We just needed to know you had a plan. I always have a plan. My phone rang. Unknown number. Victoria Sterling. Ms. Sterling, this is Robert Fitzgerald from Global Tech's board. His voice was formal but warm. I wanted to personally thank you for your presentation today. Your courage in speaking truth to power hasn't gone unnoticed. I was simply doing my job. Mr. Fitzgerald. Yes, well, we'd like to discuss you doing that job in a different capacity. Margaret Thompson speaks highly of your capabilities. The board would like to meet with you Monday morning, if you're available. I believe I can make that work. Excellent. And Ms. Sterling. Bring your team. We understand talent recognizes talent. After I hung up, I found James's personal items already boxed on his temporary desk. Security worked fast here. A sticky note on top, in David's handwriting, effective immediately. Sarah whistled low. That was faster than expected. He was never meant to last, I said. Some people are just temporary obstacles on the way to permanent solutions. My phone buzzed one final time. Margaret again. Saw the security footage of Mitchell being escorted out. The board is impressed. Richard is humbled. Patricia is silent for once. Your move, Victoria. I typed back, Monday works. I'll bring my team. All of them. The ones who matter. Perfect. We'll have contracts ready. Welcome to the winning side. I looked around the office at the cubicles full of consultants who'd stayed silent. At David's closed door, where he was probably calculating how much this would cost the firm. At the space James Mitchell had occupied for exactly 19 days before his ambition exceeded his ability. Pack light, I told Sarah and Tom. We won't be coming back. As we waited for the elevator, Sarah asked, How long have you been planning this? Since the moment Patricia Hartwell suggested I was only good for making things pretty, I admitted. She was wrong, by the way. Obviously. I'm excellent at making things pretty. I'm just better at making them profitable. The elevator arrived, and we stepped in. As the doors closed on my old life, I thought about that dinner at Le Bernardin, about Patricia's tinkling laugh and James's opportunistic smile. They'd thought they were watching me shrink. Instead, they'd watched me reload. The next day, Friday, 12:30 p.m., the Four Seasons, downtown Manhattan, Margaret had chosen the venue deliberately visible enough to make a statement, exclusive enough to control the narrative. She was already seated when I arrived, drinking champagne at a table that commanded a view of the entire restaurant, power positioning, even at lunch. Dom Perignon at noon, I asked, taking my seat. We're celebrating, she replied, signaling the waiter for another glass. Richard Hartwell just called an emergency board meeting for Monday. He's stepping down as CEO. I paused, my water glass halfway to my lips. That wasn't part of the plan. Plans evolve. Margaret's smile was predatory. Patricia overplayed her hand yesterday, after you left. She tried to defend Mitchell, suggested the board was being too harsh on innovative thinking. Fitzgerald asked her what qualified her to evaluate strategic innovation. She actually cited her experience renovating their Hamptons house. She didn't. Oh, she did. Compared vendor management for marble countertops to managing a $2 billion supply chain. Yamamoto laughed. Actually laughed. Richard realized his wife had just become a liability. The waiter arrived with my champagne and menus. Margaret waved them away. We'll have the tasting menu, both of us. After he left, she continued. Richard's taking an advisory role, golden parachute, face-saving exit. Everyone wins, except Patricia, who's about to discover what happens when your social standing depends entirely on your husband's job title. And Mitchell. Funny story. Turns out his Wharton MBA is creative fiction. He attended 2 semesters of night school. The background check I ordered this morning revealed some interesting discrepancies. You only ordered it this morning. I ordered it 6 weeks ago, the day Richard hired him. I've been sitting on it, waiting for the right moment. Your presentation yesterday. That was the moment. I sat back, reassessing the woman across from me. You knew he'd fail. I suspected, but I needed someone inside to document it properly. Someone unimpeachable. Someone like you. You used me. I positioned you, Margaret corrected. There's a difference. You could have played along, made pretty slides, collected your paycheck. Instead, you fought. That's what I was counting on. The first course arrived oysters, perfectly chilled. Margaret raised one. To strategic positioning. We ate in comfortable silence for a moment before she continued. Monday's board meeting will confirm 2 things: Richard's resignation and my promotion to CEO. The first act of my administration will be signing a new strategic consulting contract, not with your old firm, with you directly. I don't have a firm. You will. Sterling Strategic Solutions. Has a nice ring to it. We'll be your first client. $39 million over 3 years. Just like the original contract. Except this time, you'll have complete autonomy. She pulled out a folder, sliding it across the table. Inside were incorporation papers, already filled out. Sterling Strategic Solutions, LLC. My name as CEO. Sarah and Tom listed as founding partners. Presumptuous, I observed. Efficient, she countered. Your non-compete with David's firm has a loophole. If they terminate you, which they will on Monday, you're free to solicit clients immediately. Global Tech will be waiting. And my team, signing bonuses of $50,000 each for the first 10 people you bring over. Senior positions, full benefits, equity options after year 1. The main course arrived Wagyu beef, impossibly tender. Margaret let me process while we ate. There's one condition, she finally said. James Mitchell has been spreading rumors, suggesting impropriety between us, claiming that's how you got access to the board. It's pathetic, but these things can stick. What do you need? A clean narrative. You built the strategy. He destroyed it. You saved it. Simple, documentable, unassailable. No personal vendettas. No mention of Patricia's dinner party comments. Just business. And if Mitchell continues his rumors, Margaret's expression hardened. James Mitchell is about to discover that his fictional MBA is the least of his problems. The SEC tends to frown on falsifying credentials while handling public company finances. One phone call from me, and he'll be too busy with federal investigators to spread gossip. That's ruthless. That's necessary. This industry runs on reputation. Yours is about to skyrocket. His is about to crater. Natural selection. Corporate edition. The dessert course arrived soufflé, perfect and golden, just like the one I'd never touched at that dinner. One question, I said. Why did you really recruit me 10 years ago? You could have had anyone from Harvard that year. Margaret smiled, a genuine one this time. Because during your interview, when I asked what you'd do if you disagreed with a superior strategy, you said you'd document everything and wait for them to fail. Most people say they'd speak up, fight directly. You understood that sometimes the best strategy is letting idiots hang themselves. And you've been waiting 10 years for me to prove it. I've been waiting 10 years for you to be ready. Yesterday, you were ready. She raised her champagne glass one final time. So, Ms. Sterling, do we have a deal? I thought about David, probably consulting with lawyers right now, about James Mitchell, packing his fictional credentials, about Patricia Hartwell. Soon to discover that dismissing the help as decorative was a costly mistake. Then I thought about Sarah and Tom and the others, talented people who'd been marginalized by corporate politics, about the work we could do without interference from people who couldn't tell the difference between strategy and theater. I raised my glass to meet hers. We have a deal. Excellent. Monday, 8 a.m., Global Tech Boardroom. Bring your best people. Oh, and Victoria, wear something memorable. The Wall Street Journal will be there. Why would the Journal care about a consulting contract? They don't, but they'll care about Global Tech's first female CEO restructuring the company with an all-star team led by the woman who prevented a $39 million disaster. Headlines write themselves. As we left the restaurant, I saw Patricia Hartwell across the street, shopping at Bergdorf's. She saw me too, her face cycling through recognition, confusion, and then something like fear. I didn't acknowledge her. She'd become irrelevant the moment she'd mistaken competence for decoration. My phone buzzed. Sarah. David just called an all-hands meeting for Monday morning. Damage control mode. I typed back. We won't be there. Send out the Sterling Strategic Solutions announcement at 7:59 a.m. Monday. Let's give them something to discuss. Already drafted. Subject line, from pretty slides to profitable strategies. Perfect. Oh, and Sarah orders champagne for the new office. We don't have a new office yet. We will by Monday afternoon. Margaret was right. Plans evolve, and mine had evolved from revenge to complete revolution. Monday morning, 7:59 a.m. I sat in my car outside Global Tech's headquarters, watching my phone. At exactly 8:00 a.m., Sarah's email went live to the entire industry contact list we'd cultivated over the years. Within seconds, my phone exploded with notifications. By 8:03, David had called 6 times. I didn't answer. At 8:05, I walked into Global Tech's boardroom with my new team, Sarah, Tom, and 8 others who'd resigned from David's firm over the weekend. We looked like an army in our coordinated black suits, deliberate, unified, unstoppable. The board was already assembled. Margaret sat at the head of the table where Richard used to preside. The Wall Street Journal reporter stood in the corner, camera crew ready. Ladies and gentlemen, Margaret began, I'm pleased to announce Global Tech's new strategic partnership with Sterling Strategic Solutions. The contracts were already printed, waiting for signatures. As I signed my name, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. You've destroyed everything, my reputation, my career, my marriage. I hope you're satisfied. Patricia. Her marriage, I looked up at Margaret, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Richard wasn't just stepping down from the company, apparently. Ms. Sterling, the Journal reporter stepped forward. Can you comment on the sudden dissolution of your previous firm's relationship with Global Tech? I'd rehearsed this. Strategic consulting requires absolute commitment to data integrity. When that commitment wavers, changes become necessary. There are rumors that James Mitchell, who was leading the Global Tech account, has been accused of credential fraud. I focus on the future, not the past. My team and I are committed to Global Tech's success. Professional, clean, unassailable. The photographer positioned us for the announcement photo. As the flash went off, my phone rang. David. Excuse me, I said, stepping into the hallway to answer. David. 40% of my senior consultants just resigned. 40%. Victoria. Sounds like a cultural problem. Maybe you should hire a consultant. This is illegal. Breach of contract. Solicitation. David, I have emails where you authorized James to remove me from strategic decisions, where you called my work support level, where you sided with a fraud over your highest performing principal. Your board of directors has those emails too, as of this morning. Silence. Furthermore, I continued, James Mitchell's falsified credentials mean every contract he touched is potentially void, including Global Tech's. You're looking at lawsuits from multiple clients once they find out, which they will, because the Journal is running the story tomorrow. You planned this. No, David, you planned this when you chose politics over performance. I just executed better. I hung up and returned to the boardroom where Margaret was outlining the new structure. On the presentation screen was my original Singapore analysis, the one James had tried to bury. Under Ms. Sterling's leadership, Margaret announced, we project a complete reversal of our Southeast Asian losses within 6 months. Tom presented the recovery plan we developed over the weekend. Sarah outlined the risk mitigation strategies. Every slide was thorough, precise, and bulletproof. No pie charts, no word clouds, just truth. Mr. Fitzgerald. I addressed the board member who'd first supported me. You asked about our exposure to the Singapore dollar fluctuation. We've secured hedging contracts that limit our downside to 3% while maintaining upside potential. The contracts went into effect this morning. This morning, Yamamoto looked impressed. The markets opened 2 hours ago. We don't waste time, I replied. The longer you wait to address problems, the more expensive they become. After the meeting, as my team set up in our new global tech offices, an entire floor Margaret had cleared for us, I received another text, this one from James Mitchell. The SEC is investigating me. You did this? I didn't respond. The SEC doesn't investigate fiction. They investigate fraud. By noon, the industry newsletters were buzzing. Global Tech's strategic shakeup. Sterling Solutions emerges. Mitchell's Wharton claims under scrutiny. David's firm put out a press release about pursuing new directions and optimizing their consultant portfolio. Corporate speak for hemorrhaging talent and clients. Sarah knocked on my new office door corner space, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view that stretched to the horizon. David's firm just lost 2 more clients. They're citing concerns about strategic oversight. How unfortunate, I said, not looking up from the Singapore recovery plan. That's $15 million in annual revenue gone. $15 million so far? She grinned. Patricia Hartwell is telling people you orchestrated Richard's resignation. Patricia Hartwell should focus on her divorce proceedings. That's cold. No, I corrected. That's consequences. She thought she could diminish me over appetizers and I'd simply absorb it. She confused silence with surrender. Tom appeared in the doorway. The Journal wants a follow-up interview. They're particularly interested in how a single dinner conversation led to a complete corporate restructuring. Tell them the truth, I said. It wasn't a single conversation. It was a single moment of clarity when I realized that people who can't distinguish between decoration and strategy shouldn't be making strategic decisions. That's quotable. That's the point. As the sun set over Manhattan, painting the sky the color of expensive champagne, I stood at my window and surveyed the kingdom I'd conquered, not through buzzwords or political maneuvering, but through the simple act of being better at the game than the people who thought they'd invented it. My phone buzzed one last time. Margaret. Richard's divorce papers were filed this afternoon. Patricia gets the Hamptons house. Seems fitting she always cared more about the marble countertops than the foundation. I thought about that dinner at Le Bernardin, about the soufflé I'd never touched, about Patricia's laughing assessment of my decorative value. Tomorrow, the Journal article would run. James's fictional credentials would be exposed. David's firm would lose more clients. Patricia would learn that social standing built on someone else's success crumbles the moment that success disappears. But tonight, I had work to do. Real work. The kind that saves companies, protects jobs, and generates value that can't be faked with pretty slides. The kind of work they'd tried to reduce to decoration. $39 million saved. A company restructured. An empire built from the ashes of underestimation. Not bad for someone who just colors inside the lines. 6 months later, the Singapore operation had turned profitable 3 weeks ahead of schedule. The Wall Street Journal ran a feature, The Sterling Standard, How One Woman's Data Saved Global Tech $39 million. I sat in my office, reviewing the latest quarterly reports, every metric green, every projection exceeded, every decision validated by reality instead of rhetoric. James Mitchell had quietly left the country. The SEC investigation revealed more than falsified credentials. There were embezzled funds from his Chicago firm, hidden in offshore accounts. Last I heard, he was teaching English in Vietnam. His consulting days permanently ended. David's firm had dissolved 2 months ago. He'd called once, asking if I had any positions available. I told him I'd consider him for an entry-level analyst role, reporting to Sarah. He hung up without responding. Patricia Hartwell had reinvented herself as a lifestyle blogger, writing about finding yourself after divorce. Her posts about the importance of authentic living and recognizing true value were almost laughable if they weren't so pathetically transparent. Richard had moved to London, taking an advisory role with a British firm. We occasionally exchanged professional emails. He never mentioned that dinner. Victoria. Margaret stood in my doorway, holding 2 glasses of champagne. The board just approved the Asian expansion. Full funding. Your team leads the strategy. All of it. Every dollar. Turns out, when you save a company $39 million, they trust you with considerably more. We clinked glasses, looking out at the Manhattan skyline, the same view. But everything had changed. I have a confession, Margaret said. That night at Le Bernardin, I was there. Different table. But I saw Patricia's performance, saw how they diminished you. I turned to her, surprised. I almost intervened, she continued. Then I realized something. If I had protected you, you would have remained a brilliant consultant in a mediocre firm. But if I let you handle it yourself, I'd burn it all down and rebuild it better. Exactly. The best revenge isn't just success. Victoria, it's systematic success. It's building something so undeniably excellent that your detractors have to watch you rise while they fall. Sarah knocked and entered. The new team's here for orientation. 12 MBAs, all women, all underestimated by their previous firms. Send them in, I said. Let's teach them how to color outside the lines. As the new recruits filed in, eager and sharp-eyed, I thought about the journey. 6 months ago, I'd been dismissed as decoration, reduced to someone who merely prettified presentations. Now I ran a division that controlled Global Tech's entire strategic future. Welcome to Sterling Solutions, I addressed the new team. You're here because someone, somewhere, underestimated you. Someone thought you were only capable of support work, of making things pretty, of coloring inside someone else's lines. I saw recognition in their eyes. They'd all had their own Patricia Hartwell moments. Here's what they didn't understand: the person who truly understands the details, who builds the foundations, who creates the strategies. That person holds the real power. They can pretend we're decoration, but when the decoration is removed, the whole structure collapses. One of the recruits raised her hand. Is it true that this all started because of a single dinner? I smiled. It started with someone confusing competence with compliance. It ended with a $39 million lesson in the difference. That evening, I returned to Le Bernardin. Same private dining room, different purpose, celebrating Sterling Solutions' first $100 million in managed accounts. The waiter approached with the dessert menu. The soufflé is exceptional tonight, Ms. Sterling. This time, I ordered it. When it arrived, golden and perfect. I took my time savoring each bite. No one interrupted, no one dismissed, no one suggested I was only there for decoration. The maitre d' stopped by our table. Ms. Sterling, I remember you from Mr. Hartwell's dinner 6 months ago. You left before dessert. I had work to do, I replied. And now, I gestured to my team, to the celebration around me, to the empire built from underestimation. Now, I have all the time in the world. He smiled knowingly. I heard what happened to Global Tech, to Mr. Mitchell, to everyone who was at that dinner. Oh, they say you orchestrated it all, that you planned every move from the moment Mrs. Hartwell made her comment. I took another bite of soufflé, letting the sweetness melt on my tongue. They say a lot of things. Indeed they do. But between us, Ms. Sterling, was it worth it? I thought about Patricia, divorced and irrelevant. James, disgraced and exiled. David, broken and begging. Richard, diminished and distant. Then I thought about my team, brilliant and thriving. About Global Tech, saved and soaring. About the dozen young women I'd just hired, who would never have to smile politely when someone suggested they were only good for making things pretty. Every moment, I said, every single moment. As we left the restaurant, Manhattan glittering around us like a jewel box of possibilities, Sarah asked, "Any regrets?" "Just one," I admitted. "What's that?" "I should have ordered the soufflé the first time. It really is exceptional." We laughed, the sound carrying through the night air like a victory cry. The best revenge, I'd learned, wasn't served cold. It was served at exactly the right temperature, with perfect timing, and a side of systematic destruction that looked so elegant, people would study it for years. The soufflé was just a bonus. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate revenge and sweet vindication. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed watching Victoria Sterling transform a dinner insult into a 39 million victory, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever had your own Patricia Hartwell moment? How did you handle being underestimated? Let me know in the comments. Your story might inspire our next tale of revenge served at exactly the right temperature.